Welcome to Spotlight on Schools. We focus on Rochester City Schools. I'm your host, Jim Strauss. For the next two programs, our guest will be John Bliss, a longtime Rochester City School teacher. John has taught both within the Rochester City School District and in charter schools. He is the founder of the Urban Choice Charter School. You may recognize his name from several guest essays he has written for the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle. He's been critical of the direction of the city school district, and he has research-based and experience-based ideas about the way things need to change. It's a privilege to have John Bliss on the program. Welcome.
Thank you. Love it.
Okay. We're going to spend most of this first episode reviewing John's experience teaching, focusing on what has been effective. John, you told me your first assignment was at School 14, a challenging school population. You were there from about 1990 to 2000. Can you tell us first what those challenges were, how you approached them, and what results you saw?
The challenges at 14 were probably very similar to a lot of other challenges in urban schools. The obvious ones being the kids were probably being raised by mothers or grandmothers. You didn't have stable households. The environments they were coming from were probably not the greatest. Poverty was obviously an issue. Scioto Street, if you know, going north Rochester in particular gets real tough. And the kids were coming from a school system, which Rochester school system wasn't the greatest school system in the world. And the kids probably didn't go to preschool, didn't have some of the health related services they should have. So the kids were coming to me with certain issues. In terms of how I dealt with those issues, I mean, I can certainly tell you, I dealt with them as head on.
And what grade levels were you teaching?
Well, when I was at 14, it was interesting because my first experience was at the old number 8 school, which was on Conky and Avenue B. And I was there for 4 months, and then I went to number 14 school. Now, at 14 school, I was originally hired as, I think, a 5th grade teacher. Room 214, I remember the room number. It was on the 2nd floor of my first real teaching gig. And at that time, they had a lot of split classes. So I had a 4-5 when I was at 14 school. So I had 4th and 5th graders together. Now, at some point, I don't know whether it was my first year or second year, I also ended up getting 3rd grade students. So within probably 4 or 5 years when I was at 14 school, I had 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students altogether. My smallest class at that time was probably 28 kids. I had 31 kids one year when things were maxed out. So I had my hands full.
Did you have an aide, or was it just you?
Well, if you go over 27, I think the number was 27, you had a halftime aide. So I was lucky enough to have a woman, Miss Thomas, and I had some others that would come in there for half a day and help. Of course, I had a lot of community people come in, so I mean, it was a very dynamic classroom. But I was leading the show, and I was younger then, and I thought I could save the world. And when I reflect back on it, I'm actually surprised that I did as well as I did. But I loved it. It was amazing.
Okay, so you had these problems. How did you begin to address them?
I think, and that's a great question, you have to address, I probably addressed them the same way that you or anyone else would address them, from a very human perspective. My reaction was always one of an emotional reaction, that I knew that these kids were hurting, and that I felt more than anything else they needed to know that I loved them, or at least that I cared for them, that there was somebody who was going to fight for them. So in a nutshell, I would answer the question by saying, I approached this as though I was part of their family. And the only way that I was going to heal them, and by the way, that was the first thing I wanted to do, was heal them before we even talked about the fact that they needed to do well academically, was I needed to heal them like I was their father. Now, I'll just add, what was difficult about this was I had to be the father for 27 or 29 kids. And I had to make sure all these brothers and sisters got along, which was a whole different scene. I mean, it's one thing to form a relationship with a child. It's entirely different to get that child to respect and be kind to the one that's next to them. And
we're talking about 8, 9, and 10-year-olds, right?
They were rascals. I mean, whatever age it is, they were a handful, and they were high energy. But anyway, I mean, I did things went outside. I mean, there are things that we did to address those physical needs as well. So it was, I mean, I had a very fine-tuned system when I was at 14 school. It was a machine.
Mm-hmm. And as a result, you were telling me at one point you became the 1994 one of the Center for Educational Development Teachers of the Year. Is that right?
That's correct.
Because, I mean, what were the results? Educational results.
Well, in terms of test scores, the kids that I had in that room were amongst the highest achieving in the district. Mm-hmm. Now, at that time, 14 school was either, they call them SIR schools. It was either the school most in need of improvement in all of Rochester. It was one of the lowest performing schools in the district. So, I mean, I was rather proud of the fact that these kids who were in this horribly performing school competed. At that time, 46 school was considered one of the premier elementary schools, and my students were performing on par with the best elementary school students in all of Rochester in terms of reading and math performance.
And your contention is that they performed well because you dealt with their emotional needs, physical needs first.
No doubt.
Mm-hmm.
I had a poster on my door that a girl named, one of my students named Anasha made me, because I essentially preached to them. I thought it was important to teach the kids what I was doing to help them. And she made me a poster that says, you have to touch the heart before you can affect the brain, basically, or something like that. And I had on my doorway. They all knew that. The kids knew that. They needed to believe in me and needed to believe in themselves. And that's a social emotional piece switch I had to turn on before they.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is an approach that you don't see being replicated in a lot of places in the Rochester City School District. Am I correct?
You don't, and I don't, and I don't mean that to be condescending to many of the teachers. They're not. I don't know that they have an opportunity to even try this approach nowadays.
Because of so many strictures that have been placed on them, so many demands. Because of
both the demands in terms of the testing and the regiments of every day, as well as what the kids bring with in the classroom in terms of the behavior and so forth. But the system isn't designed to support relations, which is insane.
Okay. We're going to talk about systems later on. But I have another question based on that builds off of that. At that point, at School 14, you envisioned some new models and a new school unit. Although the district did not support their development, you feel these models could still be successful today. Can you talk about those?
Yeah, well, what I tried to do, Clifford Janey was the superintendent at the time. Bohan Vargas, who is now the superintendent, was the school board president at the time. Bohan Vargas wrote what's called the new school unit policy. It was a school board policy that allowed teachers and others to basically take what they were doing well and expand upon it. So I approached Clifford Janey and I said, I want to take this, I want to get a couple more teachers, get a couple classrooms, it'd be 40, 50 kids. We wanted to go in the basement of 14 school, and we want to take what I'm doing and expand upon it. And have a little more autonomy than I did at the time. Worked with central office for 6 months, wrote a proposal, short proposal, maybe 20, 30 pages, kind of highlighted what I thought it would look like. Never made it. Mm-hmm. Never got kind of beyond probably a few people looked at it. No one wanted to make it happen. And it got ugly, actually.
These groups of 40 and 50 doing the same things that you were doing in the class of 30?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Same grade levels, 3 to 5, or more?
At the time, I think the proposal was 3 to 5. Mm-hmm. I was going to have myself and 2 other teachers, and I think it was written, if I recall, maybe it was first grade, but it might have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But essentially, we were going to have 20 kids per class instead of the 31 just for me that I had at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you left public schools as a result of this not working. You went to a progressive private school, the Cobblestone School. We use the word progressive pretty loosely. What does progressive mean in terms of schools?
Well, for me, I define progressive by the approach. In other words, it's a philosophy, but to me as a teacher, it's how do the kids and the teachers react to one another? And I saw Cobblestone as being progressive because so much of what they did was really child-centered. And they developed lessons not around what was in the textbook, and they went through it sequentially. It was quite the opposite. They would find out what the kids were interested in and then develop a curriculum around those interests. I'll give you an example. I taught 6 months, all subjects around the Industrial Revolution when I was there. 6 months. We reading, writing, everything was around the Industrial Revolution. And my daughter, who was there at the time at kindergarten, spent all year learning about oceans. The entire curriculum was built around oceans. So for me, progressive is more than just a philosophy. It's an approach to interacting with kids that gives them a real sense of power in terms of the direction of where you're taking them.
I looked up the Cobblestone School. I looked at their philosophy, some of the things, for example, differentiated educational plans so that no one kid has to study the same thing that every other kid is doing. Mixed age groupings, let's see, interdisciplinary exploration, collaborative learning, enrichment experiences. Children learn and thrive within a safe, secure, and responsive community. I know that resonated with you as well. Multi-age grouping, again, their philosophy. So you were there for a couple of years, and why did you leave?
I just felt, you know, it's funny, I was with the city. I always remember when I was at 14 school, this woman said to me, "John, you're blessed because these minority kids do these things for you, particularly boys." So I knew that Cobblestone, which the population was very different, it was a private school, I knew that I had a different calling. It was nice while I was there, but I didn't see myself spending the rest of my life teaching there. I knew I had to do something else.
Okay. You then listed on your biography that you ran for the Rochester City School Board. That seems like quite a leap. Why did you do that?
Yeah, it was a leap. I did it because the Independent Party read some of my articles in the DNC, and they thought I was, I guess, a bit of a hellraiser, but I wasn't so, something I wrote or something I said must have connected with their platform. So I had a couple meetings with them, and they said, "You want to be our candidate?" And at the time, I was all about letting the public know what they need to do to fix the schools. And I figured what better way I'd go on the trail and tell people what they needed to do. So that's what happened. And I did it. I mean, I ran, and of course I lost because
you're not a Democrat.
Because you're not a Democrat in Rochester, right. So independent I thought I'd be close enough to at least come up with a good showing, but that wasn't the case either.
Okay. So what's your takeaway from that experience?
From running for doing the school board,
Yeah.
the takeaway is I don't like to go knock on people's door, particularly when it says stay away. And there were people who were not happy there. Now, on the other side, I'll tell you one thing that was very, very cool was I met parents. I had parents cry to me. I mean, I had parents say that they felt hopeless. They felt voiceless. And they were confiding in me, and it was amazing to hear people's stories. And that on a positive note.
Okay. Well, we're going to come back. We're going to take a break. When we're going to come back, we're going to talk about the Urban Choice Charter School. We're talking with John Bliss. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Spotlight on Schools. We're talking with John Bliss, a longtime Rochester City School teacher. Next, we're going to talk about the Urban Choice Charter School. You got approval from the State Ed Department to form that. It's a K-8 school. If you go to Urban Choice website, you'll find this information. Under About Us, it says you're a safe, supportive, intellectually rigorous school following the Common Core standards, founding principles, strong teacher-student relationships, balanced curriculum, supportive environment. Under adult support, it says the teachers favor differentiated instruction, maintaining a dynamic classroom, a culture of continuous improvement, instructional support staff, partners with teachers. Under classroom management model, it says practical home communication, useful classroom assessment, functional technology, effective learning centers, student accountability system. If you go to the Rochester City School District website, you'll find language that's very similar. So what are the important differences?
Well, you were saying that, and I was like, oh my God, it says all that. And I wanted to say,
It does.
I think I wrote most of that. I don't want to say that I wrote all of it, but it's funny because they're really just words. They can capture what you're trying to do in the school, but your point about the city school uses many of this, often sound the same on paper, is very true. In fact, you look at all the city schools, you look kind of their mission statement and what their best practices are, they all sound the same.
Yep.
Because it's not about the words. It's about the people who are in the school and how well they're carrying through the vision that's on the paper. And do they have the leadership? Do they have the people? Do they have the commitment? Do they have the wherewithal to make those things happen? Because I'm not big into those fashion statements. It's all about doing the hard work that's inside the schools. But there are clearly best practices that work in schools that can and should be replicated in more schools.
And you formed this and you got to hire the staff?
I did. It was, one of the significant differences between a charter school, I'll just talk about our charter school, Urban Choice, and others, is you get to hire this staff from scratch. So I was able to hire people and train people, and extensively train people, that had a similar mindset, or that I thought had a similar mindset. So when you went into that school year, although it was everything was unknown, because there were no kids, we had to create everything from scratch. In terms of, much like a football team or any other athletic team, we had prepped. We were ready for whatever was going to come through that door. There was a similar way of thinking and a similar approach amongst the employees, because we had designed it that way. Whereas I think a big difference is now is in a lot of schools, not just city schools, but all schools, if you were to go in and try to change them, the people are set in their ways, and you're going to have to try to adjust those ways, and that's really tough to do. Once people are set, it's tough to move them. So
After a few years, you left Urban Choice. Can you tell us why?
Well, I left. Actually, I was there for almost 9 years, and the main reason why I left was because we were a K-8 school, and there was really no desire to make a K-12 school. My vision was K-12. It's still K-12. I believe K-12 is the way to go with urban kids. And the idea that these 8th graders were then we were gonna kind of shake their hands, wave to them, and they were gonna go to the city school district was very hard for me, to swallow. So my vision was never gonna be complete there. And I just thought it was gonna be kind of agony for me to stay. It was horrible leaving. That was my baby. My daughter went there for 5 years. The kids had been my family for over 8 years.
Another reason you mentioned was that the social atmosphere was what you wanted it to be. The academics weren't quite up to par.
They weren't. And in fact, I think people are surprised when they hear me, because I was the founder of the school, kind of the godfather of all those kids. I was very critical of the school, particularly the academics. I have never seen a school that had this culture that our school did, that Urban Choice did. When you walked in, it was palpable. I remember we had six Fairport teachers walked through that school. All of them were crying when they left. They said they could not imagine an urban school that felt the way that school. I sent my own daughter there, so obviously I had a lot of faith in the school. But academically, although we were far better than the city school district, we weren't competing with the best of urban schools, which was my vision, was to have the highest performing kids in all of Monroe County.
Can you put your finger on why?
Why we didn't?
Yeah.
We didn't have the systems and processes, and the focus of the school and the people that started the school and that I surrounded myself with were really not operations or systems people. They were kid people. They were emotional, social people that would give their hearts first. We did not have accountabilities in place. Now they're called dashboards, but we didn't have mechanisms in place, I didn't think, to consistently measure student learning and then make the tough decisions that need to be made to raise the bar. I think we were going in that direction, but I think it would have taken a long time to get there.
Okay. Well, you then made proposals to Rochester School Superintendent Vargas and Rochester Teacher Association President Adam Urbanski for new models. They were not accepted. But what were those plans?
Well, they're doable. First of all, you know, they were called new school units way back when I was at 14 school when I originally tried to do it. And now they're called, again, they've gone through a variation of names. Mr. Urbanski calls them teacher-led schools. But the living contract that I believe Superintendent Brizard and the teachers union wrote allows teachers, principals, community people, and either others to start their own schools within the city school district, to have more autonomy, to set their own hours. In fact, the language in the contract is very clear. As long as you abide by, you know, the kind of the stricter elements of the contract, you have all the flexibility in the world to kind of create your own school. I mean, you and I could get together if we wanted to, and we could create a school about filming if we wanted to, if we put the plan together. So I approached them. I gave them a 145-page model that I put together and said, here, use it if you want to use it. And we had 2 meetings, and I thought they went well, and then I was told that there were people in central office that weren't going to give me that kind of autonomy. And I walked out and I was mad as hell. And I said, pooey on you guys.
I'm sure those were your exact words.
They were pretty darn close.
Okay. We had a conversation before this program aired where you talked about what is the stumbling block? Why do these not proceed?
That's the million-dollar question. I don't know. I don't know. And hopefully I'm speaking for parents and kids and families and teachers and principals. I don't know why the small group of people who make the decisions in the city school district, and it's a very small group that actually have the power, these 5 or 6 or 8 people can't sit in a room and say, we need to produce new models like the pilot schools that they have in Boston. It makes no sense to me. It's very doable. I'm sure that they can get people that will step up to the plate and develop the process. There's only 2 answers I can come up with, and I've discussed this with dozens of people. And one is they don't want to because they like the status quo, and they feel if they change things that, in fact, they're going to lose some power. And the other reason is...
I hope it's not that one, but go ahead. What's your second one?
Well, this is no better, is that they're just frankly not nice. They're not nice people. They don't want to do the right thing.
Well, there's a third possibility, and I think we started to talk about it, is that certain people are afraid to step out of their comfort zone to do, to step into something new.
Well, that's why I agree. Now, that's why teachers and principals and community people aren't stepping up to do them. That's true. What I'm arguing is the people at the top need to develop the process so that the rest of us who are interested in doing these know the path to follow. I can tell you that the response that I often get from the higher up is, we need a huge group of teachers or parents to come to us and to say they want to do it. They're not going to do that. People aren't going to do that because history in the city school district has shown if you spent 6 weeks or 6 months or 6 years coming up with a proposal, and it goes into a room where 3 or 4 people close the door and make a decision, it's probably not going to get approved. So my argument is, why not develop the approval process, just like the charters do, throw it out there, make it very transparent and very public, and say, here's what you need to do to get one of these things approved. It makes perfect sense. Then you have people saying, oh, we can do this. We have the resources and the time to do this. But if you don't do that, basically what you're saying to people is, we want you to walk through the dark woods with no lantern and no path, and when you get to the other side, you tell us that you're on the other side. Why would they do that? People are afraid. Besides, there's the risk of losing health insurance and all these other good things that come with the job. So it's just not happening.
Do you think that what's happening in state ed department, the threat of failing schools might push the district into
No.
doing something?
No.
Well, it happened with East High.
I love what's happening with East High.
And it was forced. The hand was forced.
Well, here's what people need to know, and this is very relevant.
Now, we're going to talk about East High in our next episode next week. However, go ahead.
I just want to, East High is an EPO, so people need to know there's a difference between an EPO and a new school unit, or what I'm proposing. Educational Partner Organization.
Go ahead.
There's a difference. They, by design, get certain autonomies. The school board central office has no control over that freedom. What I'm proposing within the district is create something like U of R is doing with East High. Only the district and the people within central office will create those autonomies for me and others that want to do it. But there's two different things.
All right. Let's talk about another idea that you had. You made another attempt to start a charter school. It was called the One Roof Charter School, a K-12 model. It didn't make it. You came close, and you still champion the concept. What's good about that concept?
First of all, I love the concept, and it's sitting in the proposal is sitting in my desk, and I walk by it every day.
Ooh.
I love K-12. I like small K-12. The fact of the matter is, a lot of kids, particularly needy minority kids, the transition, there's plenty of evidence to support this. The transition from grade 6 to 7 or grade 8 to 9 is very, very difficult. You take these kids, they have tough circumstances, they have all these variables in their lives, there's not a lot of structure, and all of a sudden you're going to take them from their neighborhood or school where they're comfortable, and you're going to put them in some other place cross town on a 45-minute bus ride. They can't make that transition. So I like the fact that you have the transition is K-12 just in terms of logistics of transporting the kids. But the other thing is all the benefits of having a K-12. I mean, your staff people are going to need, they're going to know one another. You're going to have one or two leaders that are going to be closer. You're going to have continuity, which you don't have in many of the schools. I'll give you just one final advantage is if you're a dad or you're a mom and you have 3 or 4 kids, which many of them do, you're going to go to one school and see all 4 or 5 of your kids and pick them up at the end of the day. And if you have a gripe to somebody or you want to hug somebody, you're going to know who to hug. You're going to go hug Mr. Bliss or whoever it is that's in charge of the school. I mean, there's a lot of advantages to it. So I'm a firm believer, small, K-12, nurturing, family-like atmosphere. And there's, by the way, there's schools that are doing this in School of Inquiry.
Well, we're out of time. One of the things you said at the end of your email to me was, I continue to meet with anyone who wants to work to bring about real change. It's John's contention that the Rochester City School District is broken, but that it can be fixed. Next week, we're going to talk about 4 articles, 3 of which John wrote. I want to thank you for joining me.
It's been great.
This week.
Love it.
We'll talk next week.
Okay.
I look forward to talking to John next week. Join us next week. We'll continue this discussion. Thank you for watching Spotlight on Schools. Good night.